I studied the 10 most muscular men over 70 on YouTube. They all do this. The question I kept coming back to was not what makes a man look good at 60. Plenty of men manage that with reasonable discipline and decent genetics. The question that genuinely fascinated me was what makes a man visibly, powerfully, almost offensively muscular at 70 and 75, in a way that stops people in their tracks and makes them do the mental calculation twice when they find out his age. So I went looking for them. 10 men, all over 70, all carrying lean, dense, commanding muscle that most men in their 40s do not have. And when I stripped away all the variables and looked for the common thread, what I found was not a program or a supplement. It was a priority decision most men never make. Number 1, the longevity lift. Every man over 70 with muscle prioritizes one specific movement. None of them trained primarily on machines. None focused on isolation exercises as their primary stimulus. None accepted the low-intensity, be-careful approach most fitness professionals still prescribe to men their age. What every single one prioritized, without exception, across entirely different training philosophies and equipment availability, was the deadlift, or a close mechanical equivalent, the hip hinge under load, a movement engaging the entire posterior chain simultaneously, glutes, hamstrings, spinal rectors, upper back traps. Under progressive mechanical demand, no machine can replicate with the same neuromuscular completeness. The fitness industry has spent 2 decades telling older men the deadlift is dangerous. The research disagrees clearly. A systematic review published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine found that deadlift training with appropriate progression had injury rates comparable to machine-based training and produced substantially superior outcomes in muscle mass, bone density, grip strength, and functional independence in men over 65. Every man studied had built the deadlift or trap bar deadlift into training as a non-negotiable weekly priority, performed with progressive overload applied consistently. The thick traps, dense upper back, powerful glutes and hamstrings producing the physical presence these men carry into every room, all of it built from one movement most men over 60 were talked out of years ago. The second commonality was equally non-negotiable and equally precise. Number 2. The protein density habit, how they all hit 160 grams daily without force feeding. Between 150 and 180 grams of protein daily, substantially higher than standard recommendations. The most common response when presenting this target to men over 60 is that it sounds impossible without turning every meal into a chore. Every man in this study resolved that problem with the same foundational approach, protein density rather than protein volume. Selecting foods where protein is the dominant macronutrient per calorie rather than a supporting element to carbohydrate-heavy dishes. Cottage cheese at 25 grams per cup. Greek yogurt at 17 to 20 grams per serving. Lean beef and salmon providing 35 to 40 grams per typical serving. These foods make 150 plus grams achievable across 4 meals without caloric excess. Research from the journal Nutrients found that protein distributed across 4 or more daily meals produced significantly greater muscle protein synthesis over 24 hours in men over 65 compared to the same total protein in 2 or 3 larger meals, because each meal independently triggers the leucine threshold, activating muscle protein synthesis, with each triggering event producing an additive anabolic effect. 4 meals, 40 grams each. Leucine-rich sources prioritized. That is the protein architecture every one of these 10 men independently arrived at through years of paying attention to what their bodies actually responded to. The third commonality surprised me more than any other finding in the entire study. Number 3, the recovery architecture, the sleep and supplementation routine they all shared. Every man slept a minimum of 7.5 hours, every single one. Not occasionally, consistently, protectively, prioritized above social commitments. All were in bed before 10:30 p.m. on training days, recognizing that the growth hormone pulse driving overnight muscle repair is time-specific and cannot simply be shifted to accommodate late sleep schedules. Duration matters. Timing matters more. On supplementation, 3 compounds appeared in virtually every protocol. Creatine monohydrate at 5 grams daily, consistent delivery producing the chronic loading benefits that muscle protein synthesis and neural drive require. Vitamin D3 at 3,000 to 5,000 IU combined with K2. Every man either supplemented deliberately or optimized sun exposure specifically for D3 synthesis, understanding its direct role in testosterone production and muscle fiber contractility. and magnesium glycinate at 300 to 400 milligrams before sleep, the sleep architecture benefits of which translated directly into deeper slow-wave sleep and larger overnight growth hormone pulses. 3 supplements, consistent daily delivery, combined with a sleep commitment most men their age are not making. Now, if you want this entire system in one structured resource, the Silver Athlete Blueprint covers training protocol, nutrition, V-taper technique, hormonal optimization, and recovery for men 60, 70, and 80 plus. Scan the code on screen or find the link in the description and pinned comment. These men found this through decades of trial and error. You can access it today. Number 4, the ego elimination. How they abandoned training pride and gained muscle instead. Every man I studied had at some point in their 50s or early 60s made a deliberate decision to train for results rather than the appearance of effort, and that decision fundamentally changed what their training produced. Training ego in men over 60 manifests in 2 patterns. Excessive loading, using weights appropriate at 45 that, after 60, exceed the recovery capacity of connective tissue, producing cumulative joint damage and training interruption. And training frequency ego, training 5 or 6 days weekly, because that produced results at 40, while ignoring that recovery capacity at 65 genuinely requires more rest between sessions. Every man in this study trained 3 to 4 times weekly maximum. Everyone reduced training frequency from their peak years and watched results improve. Sessions were 45 to 60 minutes. Exercise selection was deliberate. Fewer exercises performed with greater intention. Progressive overload was patient. Smaller increments over longer timelines, rather than forcing progress recovery systems could not support. This is not less ambition. It is more intelligence. The training building the most muscle at 70 is not the training looking most impressive from the outside. It is the training the body can consistently recover from and progressively adapt to, and that distinction is the entire difference between a man still building at 72 and one who stopped at 64 because his joints gave out. The 5th finding was the one I least expected, and it has the most interesting biological explanation. Number 5, the social training commitment. Not one of them alone consistently. Not one of the 10 men trained alone as their exclusive or primary mode. Every single one had a training partner, a small group, or a community context their training was embedded in. And the research behind why this consistently predicted better results is hormonal. Research from Hormones and Behavior found that men training in pairs or small groups showed significantly higher testosterone and lower cortisol during and after sessions compared to men performing identical sessions alone, with the testosterone differential averaging 15 to 20% across the study population. The social presence is not just motivational, it is endocrinologically meaningful. For men over 60, whose testosterone baseline requires every possible natural advantage, a 15 to 20% training-induced testosterone elevation produced by nothing more than the presence of another person with a shared physical goal compounds over hundreds of sessions into meaningfully different results. Find a training partner. Join a gym with community. Schedule training as a social commitment rather than a solitary one. Before the bonus point, drop a comment telling us where you are watching from and what age you are building your best physique at right now. Every comment is read. Bonus point. The telomere training connection, how heavy lifting after 70 measurably slows cellular aging. The telomere, the protective cap at the end of every DNA strand, shortens with each cellular division and each inflammatory event. Shorter telomeres are the most direct measurable marker of biological aging at the cellular level. Research from the European Heart Journal found that men engaging in regular progressive resistance training showed telomere lengths significantly longer than sedentary men of identical chronological age, with the differential equivalent to approximately 10 years of biological age advantage. Research from preventive medicine found this association was specifically stronger for resistance training than cardio-dominant exercise, suggesting that the mechanical and hormonal stimulus of heavy compound training protects telomere integrity more effectively than aerobic activity alone. The mechanism is inflammation reduction. Inflammation reduction. Every training session producing anti-inflammatory myokine release, every night of quality sleep, reducing overnight cortisol, every gram of omega-3 fatty acids suppressing inflammatory cytokine activity, All of it protecting the cellular machinery determining how fast the body ages at its most fundamental biological level. The men training heavy at 70 are not just building muscle, they are preserving the cellular infrastructure determining how they feel, function, and look at 80, one deliberate session at a time. Final thoughts. 10 men, one shared priority. The decision to treat the body as something still worth building, not maintaining, not protecting, but actively, ambitiously building, regardless of what the calendar says. What separates these men from their peers is not their genes or their history or their circumstances. It is the refusal to accept the culturally prescribed trajectory for a man their age and the disciplined daily execution of the specific behaviors that their biology rewards with muscle, strength, vitality, and a physical presence that outlasts the assumptions people bring into the room with them. You do not have to be 70 to start making the decisions these men made. You just have to make them today, before another week of untapped potential passes without the training session that would have moved the needle. Your best years are not a calendar problem. They are a commitment problem. Solve the commitment and the calendar becomes irrelevant. Subscribe to The Silver Athlete. Hit the bell. Share this with one man who needs to hear that 70 is not a ceiling. It is a starting line for the men who refuse to treat it otherwise. Check the description for the Silver Athlete Blueprint and drop a like below. Your next video is already on screen. Go train, age bold, train hard, live strong.